On December 24th, 1994, Algeria was facing an internal civil war, which started in 1991 and ended in 2002. The Civil War actually was one of the longest civil wars in history, and it was also marred with bloodshed. In fact, some of the most brutal human crimes ever recorded in history happened in this civil war. Hundreds of thousands were killed. As various Islamic groups tried to regain parts of the country from the Algerian government. One of these groups was called the Algerian Islamic Group, or the AIG. During this very turbulent and troubling time, uh, there was a heightened sense of awareness throughout the country, and especially in Europe as well. Um, for example, aircraft flying to Algiers faced the very possibility of missile attacks from the ground. Um, as a result, Air France's flights to Algiers had crews entirely made up of people who volunteered for that route because it was so dangerous, um, and facing the real possibility of being blown out of the sky. Those employees of Air France um, tried their best. In fact, it was a very stressful period for them, and they were desperate to make the best of it for the customers who were trying to rush home during the holidays. So on December 24th, 1994, at approximately 11 a.m., four men dressed as Algerian presidential police boarded the plane. Outside the plane, there was military and police who saw no problem, these four men, getting on the plane. But as they entered the plane, those who were seated weren't surprised at their appearance. Um, some of them have said they needed, well, the police actually, these four men said they needed to check the passengers' passports, but they were very erratic and they had like this nervous behavior. And the fact that they were armed raised the suspicions of one of the flight attendants, um, Claude Bernegard, who is a flight attendant for Air France Flight 8989. And he recalled noticing that the police were also armed with dynamite. Two of them were. In fact, she considered it to be quite unusual for Algerian police, who are, of course, not usually armed when they carry out checks, um, passport checks on planes. And so the Algerian military, who were outside the plane, and the police as well, who allowed these men who claimed to be president to enter, they began to surround the plane after the unsuspected delay for the plane to depart. Now, the four hijackers revealed that they were, of course, not police, but Algerian Mujahideen from the Armed Islamic Group. And they made their intentions quite known, as they wanted to establish an Islamic state in Algeria. And they had hijacked the aircraft because the national airline of Air France was a symbol of France. They viewed France as a infidel foreign invader because in Algeria, one of the main problems, or the primary problem that led to the civil war, was that there was French foreign nationals taking jobs away from the middle-class Muslims of Algeria. Abdullah Yahi, a notorious murderer and leader of the group, then immediately displayed firearms, and the two of them had these belts of dynamite, and they announced their allegiance to the GIA, which is the Armed Islamic Group. And so now their demands were met, demanding cooperation. And meanwhile, there's 220 passengers and 12 flight crew, all at their disposal. And they immediately made the women cover their faces and started to place the dynamite in certain areas of the cockpit. So the hijackers, one in particular called Lotfi, Lotfi, actually disliked seeing a lack of adherence to the Islamic beliefs, according to the flight attendant Bernagard. And the hijackers objected to the men and women sitting together. And so Yahi actually was heard to say that we are the soldiers of mercy, and that Allah has selected us to be His soldiers, and we are here to wage war in His name. Right about noon, the French Minister of Foreign Affairs, Alain Juppé, organized a crisis team. And it was around this time that the deadly attacks on certain males began. And it happened when they were starting to check the passports of most of these passengers. One of them happened to be an Algerian police officer who was forced to come up near the boarding stairs entry, and he basically knew what was going to happen to him. His pleas for survival actually went on deaf ears as they shot him and dumped the body on the tarmac floor. So the Algerian authorities at this point were refusing to agree to any of the hijackers' demands at this point. And one thing about the Algerian police is that they are quite strict in regards to hijackers' demands when it comes to hijacking planes or taking people as hostages in certain situations. Excuse me. However, the hijackers released some of the passengers, mainly the women with the young children, and even some with medical conditions. So by the end of the next day, December 25th, which was Christmas Day, the hijackers had freed about a total of 63 passengers, about maybe 1/3 of the plane. During the next couple of hours and days, the hijackers and police traded demands and counter assurances. And so later on Christmas Day, the French Interior Minister learned the terrible news that there was a mole inside the Algerian Islamic Group, the AIG, who planned the attack, and learned that the terrorist's true aim was to crash the plane into the Eiffel Tower in Paris, because that was where the plane was heading for. It was heading for, it was taking off from the Marseille Province Airport. It was to take off Houari Boudamine Airport in Algeria and landing in Marseille Province Airport in Marseille, France. So now the jig was up. And so the French minister relayed this pertinent information to the French authorities. So the French government now pleaded with their Algerian counterpart to allow the plane to get airborne, but with only enough fuel to reach Marseille. And the reason was simple. The French intelligence or French expedition team were more well equipped to deal with this matter instead of Algeria, who was quite under the gun regarding that the country was facing a serious civil war. On December 26th, the plane finally took off and touched down in Marseille at 3:30 a.m. But shortly after they landed in the darkness of night, the French National Gendarmerie, or the GIGN, which is the tactical unit specialized in hijackings, made use of the air stairs to board the plane. However, one of the hijackers noticed what was happening, but the response was late, and the GIGN were able to board the plane, and a firefight ensued with the passengers right in the middle of the aisles, and the GIGN ordered passengers and crew to get down as low as possible with their hands on their heads, hide, and try not to move as the scene became, utter chaos at this point. But incredulously, as the smoke cleared, 4 of the hijackers were killed, and the remaining 154 passengers remained alive. 13 had minor injuries, but 3 passengers were killed before the raid took place. And yet, what we see here with the hijacking of Air France 89 was that we finally got to see the potential for a plane being used as the weapon to crash into a high-valued sensitive target, which was the Eiffel Tower. Was this the initial idea to use the plane as the weapon to crash into a target? This is even before the operations of the Bajinka plot, which was another operation in which that there was going to be at least a hijacking and the plane to crash into CIA Langley headquarters. So here we are with Air France hijacking 89, a incident in time that hardly anyone brings up in this day and age, and is often forgotten in the textbooks of history, especially when we talk about the September 11th attacks.